It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. This podcast was formed to collectively build a bank of stories from normal people sharing their nonlinear paths. Unfortunately, social media paints a narrow picture of what success looks like, so I'm doing my best to spread the news that changing course is common, and you don't have to know what you want to do the rest of your life when you're 18. If you're a parent and you're worried about your young adults and whether their path is leading them to success, you're in the right place. I'm a therapeutic consultant who works with young adults to connect them with resources that'll help them get back on their path to success. So if you're curious, let's chat. You can schedule a free consultation through my website. Today, my guest is John Morris. After undergraduate at Ohio Wesleyan University and completing his MBA from Penn State's Smeal School of Business, John embarked on an 8-year career trading options on the floor of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. If you ever meet John and you don't know this part about him, when you meet him, you just will be in complete disbelief that that was a part of his past. He just does not seem like that type of guy. So while lucrative, this lifestyle was ultimately unfulfilling for him, which led John to Park City, Utah. He had always been drawn to the active lifestyle that resort towns offered and is an excellent athlete, skiing, biking, and golfing. After successfully starting, developing, and jettisoning 2 businesses in Park City, one was a snowmobile tour and another was property management, John realized his passion and purpose was better served helping others and living an active and sober lifestyle, and he began to immerse himself in the treatment recovery world back in 2007. And the rest is history. So let's not wait any longer. Here's John. Hey, John, I'm glad to finally have you as a guest on the podcast.
Oh, excited to be here. Hi.
Let's just jump in because we are short on time, but I think that just means that it's going to drive people to connect with you after the fact. So this is just going to be like an entry taste, right? Give them a little bit of a flavor, and then we're going to actually want them wanting more. So why don't you tell our listeners, where did you grow up and what was the information that you were receiving about like what you were supposed to do after high school?
Well, I'm a lucky human who was adopted before birth by 2 parents who were big on education and life experience. So I went to a summer camp as a kindergartner, and the teachers there, it was at a school, and the teachers there were the counselors, and my parents liked them. And because of that, they sent me to this pretty sports-driven private school on the East Coast outside of Philadelphia, where I, as a child, was super happy playing sports in 3 different trimesters of the year and having a good old time as a young man.
How did we get from there to what you're doing today?
Well, we only have 23 minutes, so I'll try to keep it short. I was a young man. Music drove me. Got myself in a little bit of trouble smoking marijuana and getting interested in the Grateful Dead as a high schooler. It definitely affected my sports performance, I would say. Ended up going to college in Ohio and then doing the ski bum thing in Park City, Utah, in between college or after college. And once again, my parents came to the rescue and 2.5 years in said, if you want to go to graduate school, we'll pay for it, but you have to go now. I think they were concerned that I was going to be a ski bum for the rest of my life. And I had a knee injury that season, and so I put in a bunch of applications, wrote them all about my only work experience had been catering, selling beer on Grateful Dead tour, and being a server at restaurants. So I wrote my graduate school essays on the restaurant industry and how you had to kind of figure out what people wanted before they knew what they wanted, and you had to do 100 things at once and be on point, and how that really juiced me. And so I ended up at Penn State University with an MBA in finance and came out of there and ended up as a clerk on the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, where I within about 6 months, the firm that had hired me, they put me on an overnight desk trading the German stock exchange. And then I ended up down on the floor, where I ended up in a 10-year career of being a market maker on the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, which was in the late 90s, was sort of a wild time, the internet craze and Dell Computer. I was in the Dell Computer pit for about 6 years, 7 years, and got myself in a little bit more trouble with drugs and alcohol, and ended up leaving that field. My job is no longer there. It's all on computers now. But we were market makers on the floor and we traded options. And I moved back to Park City, Utah, ostensibly to get sober. And it took a little bit, about a year and a half, to finally get well. And when I did, I was asked by a human to drive someone to rehab. And they paid me a couple $100s to do so. And I said, well, is this a business? And he said, yes. And so I became sort of interested in, like a lot of people do who get well, wanted to help others. And that is how I ended up in the adult addiction world. I kind of packed things up and moved to Los Angeles and spent a decade kind of getting as much training as I could, as much clinical experience as I could. And about 15 years into this world, I kind of feel like I'm hitting my stride.
And just so folks know, and we'll make sure we include all the links in the show notes to like what you're actually doing. How would you describe all of the hats that you wear? Because I think you just alluded to, okay, one of the things that I can do, right? One of the many like trades that I offer through the business that you provide is like escorting or transporting or kind of companionship. But what else?
So through my career, I've kind of, my journey has sort of been always sort of a call John Morris, he'll do it type of journey. I tend to not shy away from maybe difficult or complicated, let's say, jobs. What I did was I got trained as an interventionist, and maybe I'll speak of the arc of the journey. I got trained as an interventionist, and I had been doing, I started a sober companion company, which is a model where we help people, we live with them one-on-one, 24/7, typically post-treatment. I started a company doing that at 2 years sober, which is sort of A, arrogant, and B, not so, probably be arrogant too. And sorry, it's just the truth.
A, arrogant, B, arrogant. Okay, hindsight's 2020.
You're sober, you really know how to be a sober companion. But I knew I wanted to help others. I knew I was a recovering, let's just say, entitled human who maybe could help other recovered people of means. Let's just say I had the background from finance and from the Grateful Dead, and I heard about musicians on the road and actors on set and things like that. And but I also was really clear that if I was going to work in this field, I wanted to have a good bit of clinical background behind me. I couldn't just be a sober guy saying I'm a sober coach. So what I did was I went to work and got myself trained in what they call a CADAC at the time, Certified Drug and Alcohol Counselor in the state of California. That involved working in a treatment center, a couple 100 hours of that, and then I'm a level 2, probably could be a 3 now, but that's like 10,000 hours of actual work. And, I got trained as an interventionist and started doing interventions as well. And so between the intervention thing and the coaching thing, lots of opportunities for personal and business development growth sort of offshooted out of that. One of the things that was enticing to me was, how do we, if we believe that when it comes to addiction and on some level mental health as well, if we can give someone the space and the time to not expose themselves to the things that were affecting their central nervous systems in a negative way, there could be space for the brain to recover, for the body to recover, for the soul to recover, and to sort of, I really believe that if you had a guide doing that, i.e. a companion, maybe you could do that more effectively than if you were doing it on your own and sort of bumbling your way through it. And one of the things I bumbled across and stumbled across was neurofeedback, which really interested me in terms of speeding up that process. One of the things neurofeedback does is helps people fall asleep better, helps people be less anxious. It's sort of a symptom-driven protocol software, sort of a cheater's way to get, you can climb up a mountain and meditate for 3 years, or, you can do 40 or 50 sessions of neurofeedback. So that really enticed me because I love a good loophole and I love to sort of speed up a process. So that morphed into me getting some training, buying some software, and I started a private practice doing that. So I do, on the coaching front, everything from, standard hour-long coaching or accountability partner type stuff that you could sort of say might fall under a case management / monitoring / accountability partner type of situation. I love to sort of hybridize coaching and that, and be somebody's person. Typically work with males in that area. So I would say I become somebody's guy, and they can call me, pretty much any time, and I become their sort of like one of their support structures. So I do that coaching piece. I do the 24/7 companion thing. I bring neurofeedback software on companion jobs. I may be the only human in the country who does that work and combines those two things. I have done things like, I could just talk about my last 10 days before Thanksgiving. I was sent to the Pacific Northwest to be in a house with a young man who was fairly psychotic, marijuana-induced psychosis. His mom was sort of trying to titrate him down from the marijuana, and he was smoking some CBD joints. I came in the house and lived there for 4 to 5 days in an effort to establish trust with him and get him to agree to go get some help. It was a beautiful job. We went up and down, and I was able to sort of, he eventually figured out that I was on his team. We were trying to sort of avoid him going to a behavioral health hospital. He had had some traumatic experiences at several of those in the past. And I kind of looked at him and said, hey, I'm here to support you and hopefully stabilize you so you don't have to do that step again, which he appreciated at times. Other times he was suspicious of why I was there. But we got him to agree to enter into a facility where he's getting, he probably wouldn't have been accepted at said facility had we not done that work first.
Yeah.
But from there, I hopped on a plane and went to Chicago, where I worked with a mom, dad, and 2 kids, where we did a neurofeedback intensive. We did a session in the morning for everybody and a session at night for 3 days. We were sort of targeting one of the humans in the family, but we helped the daughter as well, was struggling with some sleep issues. And I kind of do that as a way to introduce neurofeedback to people. So, if they get some good results in 6 sessions over 3 days, we then find them a provider, where they are, and that, they've already kind of figured out, I figured out some of their protocols already, and they, we can send them to someone there. And so I love that as a way to sort of introduce neurofeedback to people. So, yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So I think what you said earlier, like people, when it feels like it's a complex situation or like a complicated client, or like really we just need one person to go in and potentially pull out all the different like cards showing up in real time to work with a client, that's when they need to call John Morris.
Right.
And I think you also hit the nail on the head. To my knowledge, and if anybody out there like knows somebody else that does this, I don't know anybody that provides neurofeedback and all of the other additional supports, accountability, coaching, case management, intervention, like prevention, all of the Keynote Companion, all of those types of supports in real time. I don't know anybody else that does what you do. So you really are a unicorn, but a really cool one if somebody actually knows about you. And so reach Aftercare, reach Neurofeedback. We're going to have all the links in the show notes. John, here's my follow-up question now that we've kind of heard all of your story, which was like, again, like cliff notes, right? Like here are the highlights or just like chapter titles for some of the journey that's led you to where you are today, which is a pretty fascinating path. So if you could go back and change anything about your life's path, my question is, would you? And if you say yes, then my follow-up question is, what would it be? You're looking at me like, oh, I don't know if I like that you asked this question.
Yeah, I love it because it speaks to, as you were inviting me on this podcast and I know success is sort of part of it. And I'm kind of thinking that it's, not really about me and a promo for me, but really just a conversation about success and what is success, right? And particularly, and how do we measure it? How do we incorporate it? How do we create it? So, the spiritual answer is no, there's nothing I wouldn't change because everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And theoretically, I'm supposed to learn from all of it. Are there things that I regret that I've chosen? Yes, a lot of them. Do I think I can learn and grow from them and hope that, I'm not sure I believe in reincarnation, but I love the concept of my soul sort of growing over many lifetimes because, I'm not sure in this lifetime I'm going to get to Buddha status. So, not to take a strange tangent, but, I bought 1,000 shares of Facebook at 91 and sold it at 110 2 months later, and it's 600 today. Would I change that? Of course. You know what I mean? But do I use that mistake as just, I'm not in charge of outcomes. I think it speaks to a lot of the times the work that I do, where I really know, like, I've done some of what felt like my best work with humans who did not necessarily stay sober after we did that work together. Okay? And some of what felt like my worst with people who did. And so, for me, there's a couple things have come out of that. One is that I know it's not about me, right? Which really helps me because, at 21 on that journey, my ego was a lot different than where it is today, right? And so when I know that success is not necessarily about me, but perhaps I'm a vehicle or a way for someone to model and find their own, that helps me practice a tamping down of my ego that I definitely need, right? So on some level, I do this work for that because I'm selfish and want to be better myself, right? And so what I do is I try to give 110% to everybody. And sort of in self-preservation as well, I have to not be that invested in the outcome, right? I can love you. I can give you 110% of my love, right? But I also have to almost be sort of like flatline around what the outcome for you is. And that's actually really freeing in our work. It gives me the space to sort of just, I don't want to say not care because obviously I care, right? But in terms of measuring success, it's not relevant. And that's really a free place to be. I just got off the phone with someone where I did a fantastic job, but there's something that I did during the job that I tried to make an alliance with a young man by reading one of his books that was, he was not in a very well place. It's one of his like treasure books. And he gave it to me to read it, but I shouldn't have taken it, right? And I know I can get better, and I got the feedback that was a mistake, right? At the time, it didn't feel like a mistake, right? So yeah, so I don't know. I feel like I can always learn, I think it's no secret we know each other. So I think that I end up in enough complicated situations that, you can't make these stories up, like you just can't make them up. And, I didn't start writing a book 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and I've forgotten most of the things that have happened anyway. But they're all sort of clever, anonymous stories of how humans are trying to get better.
So, John, I feel like, I don't know how, I just blinked and this interview ended. And so there's so much more that I want to actually talk about. So we might have to earmark doing a future conversation, or maybe even just have separate video calls down the line to maybe kind of do more educational information around what does it mean to have somebody come in and live with you, right? I know there's tons of information out there that families can access, but I also think it's helpful to just kind of continue that thread of having somebody that was here as a guest and then potentially have follow-up where they can demonstrate just, again, a little bit more exposure in their area of expertise. And it is very true that we know each other. I think the one thing that I like about you, and I'm glad that you finally popped on to be a guest, we're available to be a guest. Let's be real. You're so busy all the time, yet you're always responsive. You're one of the few people that's really quick to communicate, whether it's about a current case or a potential case. And so even though you're jet setting all over, helping people in all the different ways that you show up for humans, you're always accessible. And I think I wanted to end on that note because I want people to know your contact information is in the show notes if they have questions about anything to reach out to John, because if anything, he wants to at least talk about it, right? Let's see if we can make it work. Let's see if I'm available when you need it, how you need it. And so, John, thank you for being you, for the journey that you've been on, and for being a guest on the podcast. I know somebody's listening to this and will really appreciate it.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.